Hi there. We're so glad everybody's here on this Wednesday afternoon for us to talk about text-dependent writing frames. Doesn't that sound exciting for a Wednesday afternoon? Hopefully, we've got some great tools to
Of course
share
it's
with you.
exciting.
I'm telling you.
I mean, come
Um,
on.
but however, I hope we have some good tips and tricks for you. For those of you that aren't familiar with Academic Alliance, we are funded from the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Services. We operate out of the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. We don't care that they lost Saturday. We're still Gamecock fans. Um, and our mission is really to research and disseminate evidence based practices. And we're so glad that we can kind of share some things that we found. Our job is to really support school districts, schools, teachers, to help those of you that are doing this difficult work. And so we want to talk today about a couple of strategies. Here's our team. Mitch Shell is our senior advisor. Dr. Deanna Parrish, who'll believe his own, is our program director. Jenny Saunders is our program coordinator. I am the lead facilitative coach, and Ginger is a facilitated coach with me. And she wears that general education hat. And so when Ginger and I started talking about this session, um, I, being a former uh, resource teacher, thought, wow, this will be fun to be working with my general education partner as I did so many years ago. It doesn't matter how many years, we still have to collaborate to serve our children. And so that's the angle that we're coming in for this today. Um,
So, good afternoon. And yes, I am super excited about talking about writing. I'm a former English teacher, and Susan and I were talking about that today. And I said, I still feel like I'm teaching writing because I have a um, children and a husband who write all the time as well as I do. So the things that we're going to talk about today, actually, we use here in real life at my house. We were just talking about that today. But the questions that we hope to answer today are: what are text dependent writing frames? How can we teach and incorporate the use of writing frames across the content areas, which is so important? And how can we provide additional support for students with disabilities and others who struggle with learning?
And I think that's important, Ginger, because our funding is about improving outcomes for students with disabilities. But we know that those strategies that we use for students with disabilities also work with our multi-language learners and also just students who have trouble learning, which there are a lot of students out there that do have trouble learning. So that's a win for everybody. Hold on, let me see if I can flip this forward, Ginger. There you
You
go.
got it. So, if you were in our last webinar, we talked about writing and the ELA standards, and I love our ELA standards that we have in our state right now. But the overarching expectation that we're going to really address today, and as it relates to text dependent frames, is to cite evidence to explain and justify your reasoning. We teach students all the time. Not only do they need to tell us what they think, but tell us why they think that. And being able to cite evidence from either something they're reading or something they've researched or something they've seen or someone that they've interviewed, but to be able to explain and justify their reasoning behind their opinions and their ideas. So that's my overarching expectation today as we look at this work. So, what are text dependent writing frames? I was telling Susan when we started working on this, and when we went to Anita Archer's training back in May, it's funny that that's what this is because I've been doing this all my life. They're just structured sentence starters and organizational tools that you use with students. They help students answer with evidence from your text, specifically to address things where they need to go back and cite their evidence. I did put the link there into the College and Career Ready Standards for page 28 that links us back to that overarching expectation. And then some examples that I would use with my students. It's just basically saying, one reason is what, and explain how the text supports this, or according to the passage, blank shows, but just giving them sentence starters to help them answer questions.
I'm coming.
I
There you go.
know it's okay. It's okay. So we like to talk about writing, not just as an isolated content area, because we write in every subject area. So how can we use these writing frames across the content? One of the areas that we can use them is in ELA, like I just mentioned, for character development, theme analysis. And I put the glossary there from the ELA standards because when we're talking about theme analysis, you want to dive into all the things that go and relate to that plot development, that relates to theme, character setting, rising action, falling action, all those things that are, then those terms are specifically written and defined in the glossary. In science, you could use it to explain processes, photosynthesis, weather cycles, just basically to help students support and supply evidence to their reasoning and help to build a hypothesis. In social studies, you can help them learn to report facts, cause and effect, and historical events and people. And then math, I love this idea, to make sure that they can justify how they got an answer, problem-solving strategies. So I just created this narrative frame, and we know that for our ELA, that for grades 3 and 4, for the new TDW that we wrote this past year, that 3rd and 4th grade used the narrative as their writing genre, and that is to convey an experience. And so I just created this narrative frame just from basically what I would think a student could possibly retell a story or retell something from his or her own life about how they've experienced something. In grade 5 and 6, we write persuasive, and then in 7 and 8, we do informing and persuasive writing. But I pulled these samples from the standards at the bottom of the page that I've cited here. So that's just an example that you could give to a student and help them work through that, as coach them, model it, and then allow them to go in and use that together in your classroom. Another example would be for science. Those are the standards that relate to a prompt that might be relevant to explain how plants make food. You could give a student a frame, hey, according to the text, plants make foods through what, and then help them have the steps, first, second, and third. And then why is that process important? And then the next one is math. And this just helps a student basically tear apart and diagram a story problem in math. In this problem, we were asked to figure out what, and some of the information was already given, including what and what. And then to create a plan to solve the problem, I decided to use a number of steps just to help the students figure out how they do it, but then also be able to explain to you how they got the answer. Okay. Now, why are these frames important and why do they matter? For me, it helps me as a teacher provide a structured way for students to communicate using academic language, because we know that students a lot of times write the way they talk. And while we can still understand them, that's not what we want them to do when it comes to writing. And we know that right now, texting and social media, those pieces, while they are helpful, they're also our enemy when it comes to helping a student learn to write, because a lot of times, like I said, students learn to write like they talk. So there is colloquial conversation, but there's also expected grammar and expected writing that you would want a student to do when they're writing. Writing frames also help the scaffold thinking and communication to address those modes of writing that I just talked about, persuasive, informative, expository, and then narrative. And then it helps to organize that knowledge because it improves that comprehension and recall over time as they go through skills. I love it because it helps students to improve their writing conventions and just become more masterful writers as it helps them to develop their own style. And then text-dependent responses, it helps them to build their literacy skills across all subject areas. Finally, it just gives them a true format to help those learners who need that extra, I call it a stair step. And I did, once again, put the ELA standards there. I was telling Susan today, my son came home with an assignment from college. He's a senior in college. And I've been using writing frames with them ever since they were young. And he actually came to me last night and shared with me, he had taken the rubric and the example from the professor, and he took what he was supposed to do, and he took all the stuff out, and then he just left the frame there for himself to fill in. And I thought, wow, look what he's done on his own. So this helps him, even though he's a senior in college, it's helping him be able to have at least a safety net as to what he needs to do.
Ginger, thanks so much for giving us that overview. I was just thinking how important, and you hear people talk all the time, how can we do things across curriculum? And this is such a great way for teams to work together, no matter what the level, whether it's elementary or secondary, to really incorporate improving writing skills, but also you're improving their content area skills as well, which I call a win-win. Um, I want to talk just a minute from the importance for students who struggle, and particularly our students with disabilities, about using an instructional format routine, lesson design, and presentation. Because a lot of times we think kids are bored if we don't do things the same way every day, but actually, instructional formats, having the same format to do everything, actually really helps students who struggle because they're not trying to figure out what you want. They're concentrating on the content. And there is some evidence to show that this removes cognitive load. And we'll talk about that again. I'm sure somewhere I always get ahead of what I'm supposed to be saying. I'm so sorry. But why do we use it? Because it really simplifies your time. So if students know that when you're teaching this beginning writing, we're always going to start with this instructional format. We're going to do the same thing every single time. It's great. It's not only great for students who struggle with learning, but students with high anxiety, students who have
Mm.
experienced trauma and stress. We know that those things, man, make them feel a sense of control. Hey, I got it. I know what's happening. It's very sure. And so those little things are instructional things that we are doing to help support kids with their behavior when we use them. And so we would, say that using these in frames is really important. It does, there it is, it lessens the cognitive load so that they can really concentrate on the content. And the other thing it does for me, it makes sure I'm doing all the stuff and not the fluff. A lot of times we want to give students too much information and we talk too much and they cannot process all of that information. So it helps us really, and it doesn't have to be boring. You're still covering content, you still have your great personality, but you're giving them that framework. Um, when we begin to design instruction, we begin by providing this really intense scaffolding for new content. Um, and the important thing to remember is that we gradually reduce that. We remove the scaffold, and that's where people mess up. They don't take the scaffolding down. And so while we're going to show you some pretty heavy scaffolding to start with, remember you don't stay there. Once kids get the hang of it, you start reducing the amount that you give them. Anything else about that one, Ginger, that you can?
No, I love what you said about it helps to give the students that a model. And it's just I just referenced my own child who, like I said, is a senior in college, and he has been doing this, and he brought that to me last night, and he built his own frame as a way of something that he it helped to reduce the cognitive load for him. He knew where to start then. So, so the basics of explicit instruction is that delivery piece, and we just set this up in that perfect gradual release model. I do as a teacher. I model filling in the frame. I have they watch me do it, and we do the same thing together. Then we fill it in together and we scaffold that and we work with each other and I model what we're doing. And then as we do that, we start doing it in pairs and then we do it alone. But you're just working through the process so that eventually you could have your own students create their own frames to help them better tackle an assignment or even when they get ready to take an assessment, whether it be something that you've made as a teacher or on SC Ready. They could build their own frame just on a piece of paper before they start pre-writing their own assignment.
And I was thinking, Ginger, when we were talking about this, how important it is for those next instructional moves. So a lot of times we talk about how we group students, or a lot of times I did some co-teaching in the classroom, and that might be a thing that we look at a group of students and see, wow, there's some who, wow, we did the I do, we do, you do, and they still need a little more we do. And so that's a great small group to bring together so that you're not releasing them too soon. And one of the things I think that's happened with a lot of the I do, you do, we do is that we think that's enough. There's some students that need the you do, you do, you do, we do, we do, we do, we do, we do, we do. Some of them need more you do, you do, you do practice. And so we have to look at where they are. And that's where some of our small group instruction comes in, is when we see students need more.
And Susan, even back to that point, sometimes you have to do a lot of I do, I do, I do, because the teacher wants to make sure that she or he has it correctly before you go again. And you know what? You learn along the way. That one frame that I created might not work, but I'm going to revise it and polish it for the next time.
Absolutely.
So where do we begin? I think this was your Susan, but I'll do it.
Oh, is it mine? See, okay. All right, I'll talk about this. It's one of my favorites. Thank you. I've already messed up today. I like to talk about the turn it around. So sometimes we expect students to be able to do too much before they're ready. So, and I don't care how old they are. I mean, I've taught up through high school, and if a lot of times they don't know how to read the question and then turn the question into the part of an answer.
Right.
And so that's one of the first skills, for one of the first prerequisite skills we want them to be able to do. And you can do an easy check for that. But think about this for, if I'm the resource teacher, this might be something I would front load in my resource classroom, right? And make sure they can do it. And if they can't, I'm going to teach that. And you're going to think of the answer, or locate the answer in the text, and then you complete the answer. Those are the steps for the turn it around. And so, like, this is what it would look like. When we teach the turnaround strategy, we don't want to teach it when we're trying to teach a content in writing. We're going to use really stupid, high interest things that kids like, right? So it might be, who is the best dressed teacher in our school? And they would say, the best dressed teacher in our school is. And then they would put that information. We might add another prompt to say why, but right at that beginning, we're just getting them started in turning things around from the question so that they make sure they're addressing the question. I know one of my favorite things is I was in a class when I was working on my doctorate, I will never getting a note from one of my professors that said, read the question. And so that's one of the things that them looking and turning it around helps them to make sure they're reading so that they're getting the answer. So Ginger said she wouldn't do this, but here's just a little example that we could use, okay? Because, my granddaughters are all into the Taylor Swift and Travis, So I might have a text like this. Thank you, Chat GPT. Travis Kelce is comfortable with Taylor's megawatt fame, generally adores her publicly, and adds a sense of fun and normalcy. Compared to the privacy-heavy or drama-filled past relationships, Travis comes across as relaxed, confident, and supportive, like he's on her team. So my question is, what is one reason Travis Kelce is a better match for Taylor than her other boyfriends? And so I would scaffold my prompt answer when I'm teaching this about how to turn it around. Travis Kelce is a better match because. And so I just did that to show you that I know that sounds so basic, right? Kids should be able to do that. They need just that explicitness of learning how to do those things with practice. And notice we're not trying to do any content. We're doing something very high interest to give them the skill of being able to really read that question and turn it around and work on the answer. So one other thing that I think is really important for students is to make sure that they even know what question words are when they're answering questions and what kinds of answers. So one of the things that I typically did, and I used to have these up on my wall, with things that you probably weren't supposed to put on your wall. That's how they were glued on. Um, but really starting out to teach them, and this is a great activity that can be done that's kind of specially designed for students to make sure that they know that if the question word is where, we're going to be looking for some kind of place. And what are place words? Let's think of all the place words that we can think of, that they understand that concept. These are actually concepts. And so we have to teach those in isolation, and then we want to give them examples and non-examples so that when they see that word where, they immediately start thinking, okay, when I look back into the text, I'm looking for some kind of place, or as I think about that story I listened to, or whatever it is. So this is one of those prerequisite skills that I feel like a lot of times we miss. And so students struggle. They can't do the text dependent questions because they don't really know what the question's asking, because they don't have a good command of the question words. Now, I always say if students have been in speech, they got this, because almost on every speech IEP, you'll see the 5 question words. But some of them it didn't stick, and they haven't learned to transfer it even into the content that they're doing. So I taught question words in isolation, and then one of our activities, they didn't even have to answer the question. They had to highlight the question word and put what kind of answer they were doing. That's how you scaffold that instruction down. We weren't even worried about answering the questions. I wanted to know, did they know what the question words meant and what kind of answers they would look for? So that's an example of a prerequisite skill that you need if you're getting into students answering text-dependent questions. Why do you not want to go for it? There you go.
So using these text-dependent writing frames are helping to build them. We just wanted to give you some prerequisites as well as some examples. So first of all, you have to understand the type of writing. I kind of gave some examples earlier. Explanation, argumentative, persuasive, which is counterclaim, a claim and counterclaim, opinion, prediction, cause, effective, narrative. If we go back and think about, and I don't want to talk about necessarily the test, but if we want to go back and just think about how we can help our student work through the processes, but also know that if you're a 3rd grader and 4th grader, you've got to teach them narrative writing. So if you're building frames to help them work through that writing genre to prepare themselves eventually to sit down and take an assessment, working through that process to build those frames is key. So the next slide provides some wonderful examples on potential writing frames, specifically looking at the different types of writing that I just mentioned. So the last block talks about personal narrative paragraphs, and it gives some sentence starters that you can use to help your students. We know that 3rd and 4th is narrative, 5th and 6th is persuasive, and 7th and 8th is either informative or persuasive. So these are just great examples to use to help build those frames in the classroom, but also kind of give your students a head start on being able to tackle that writing assignment, no matter where it is across the content.
Absolutely. And Ginger, we put some documents in the folder that we're sharing that have some additional writing frames that you can use. One thing that I would add that really helps our students who struggle is that we get kids proficient on one and really concentrate on that kind and get them going on that, particularly as they're getting older and they're supposed to be doing many more different kinds of writing as we're developing that in the standards. And using the same frame when you start. That helps. And then part of reducing that scaffold might be to lessen the frame and get it a little bit, a little bit less and a little bit different. But using the exact same thing at the beginning gets them proficient on how they're supposed to tell that narrative and build that.
And what you said, Susan, is what is so point on, because that's why I love that we start teaching narrative. We teach all the content and all the types of writing, okay, across the grade levels. But I love that you truly do in 3rd and 4th grade. You master that narrative. You should master narrative so that they can do a wonderful job as they go through, and they can show what they know on that assessment because you teach that same frame over and over again. And then by the time you get to 6th grade, you've got to do not just a claim, but a counterclaim. So these examples that you provided in our resources have been they're going to be great for y'all to look at and see if you can use them in your classrooms with your students. So guidelines for implementation. Oh, this is yours. I'm sorry. I don't want to take over. Go ahead.
You know what? I'm really fine if you do take
I just
over.
love that we're tag
I
teaming,
think
you know.
I always get ahead. I always get ahead of myself. Begin with one type of frame
Mhm.
and use the same frame until 80% of your students really have it. And when you see they're like where they're not even hardly using it, you know you got it. And then this is where we differentiate. So I hear people talk about differentiation all the time and they go, what is it? Well, scaffolding is a way we can differentiate in class. And so you can begin to provide some different frames for students based on where their level of success. So some students may not even need the frame. That's fine. Let them go. Don't hold them back with the frame. This is where we give that support. This is a type of universal design also, even though kids are doing different things, it's a choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And some you may just have to provide a few prompts, and some may need that intense support, that specially designed instruction that the teacher's gonna, that maybe that special education teacher is coming in and giving some extra help with some more visuals to help that student. But one of the things we want to make sure is that students are getting to mastery. I love this saying from Anita Archer, who is, of course, our master at explicit instruction. Perfected practice over time makes perfect and permanent. And sometimes we leave things too soon and nothing gets mastered.
Right.
And so it's really important for us to take a look at that and think about it as we're doing this work. So our next steps are to identify the types of response and then start thinking about, removing the support. So one of the things we have to do is teach students keywords to be able to identify the type of response. Once again, you're going to do that the same way you would do question words. What are keywords that let us know that we're writing a persuasive, that this is about persuasion? And then have students select a writing frame. So they're going to make their own choice. They're going to say, oh, I know, maybe Zane did this the other day. Hey, this is the particular writing frame I'm using. And then begin to teach them strategies to develop their own frame. How are they going to develop how they remember how to do this work? Because remember, we want them to be independently writing. And I hate to keep talking about the test, but they've got to be able to do that by the assessment.
They have to.
It's really important. Here's an example of how you may have started out with a really heavy frame, but you've gotten kids to a cognitive strategy. I love this one called PEEL. So they make their point, make a clear and relevant point. They have evidence, back it up, support your point with examples from the text and explanation. Explain your point and how the examples support the point, and then link your point to the writing prompt. And so cognitive strategies like that are a natural release from those writing frames, because I can actually think about PEEL and know, okay, I've got to remember to, make my point. And so I don't have to sit there. I can get that because it's a strategy I've got in my head to give me a reminder. We all use cognitive strategies all the time. So that's an example of how you go from a very heavy thing to a least restrictive.
So we have lots of great resources in our standards. We have our glossary. We have our, the writing components that are there. Your standards are explicit with indicator insights. I feel like our State Department has provided us some wonderful resources. Those folks who worked on the standards really gave us a plethora of information. The supplemental references and resources that come with that have been helpful too. One of the things that they talked about during their professional developments, as well as is alluded to in the standards, are the use of signal words for writing. That helps students know what's coming and helps a reader know what's coming too. So these signal words, this is an example that came and is cited here at the bottom too. But this specific one is been there to provide scaffolds to support English language learners. But we know that this resource would be something that would be relevant to help any writer, even us as adult writers.
And I think that's building that vocabulary. So once again, I like to think about what's some extra support students who struggle might need. And of course, I'm always going to come about it from my resource hat, or whatever support service hat, whatever we call it in your particular building. This is such a great thing that we can teach as a prerequisite skill. We can front load kids with this so that they know how to do this in class. Yeah, this is just a sample that we pulled. I love, and I will tell you, this is just the truth. The things that we do for kids with disabilities work with our multi-language learners. And
Absolutely.
so we don't have to do something. There's not all these pots that we're trying to do all these things. If we do this, it's going to work for a lot of different students.
So just remember that the benefits for using writing frames for students are that it reduces that cognitive load, just like you said a second ago, Susan. Like I said, I keep going back to Zane, but the assignment that he had yesterday was very overwhelming. And I told him, I said, just read it and think about it and then come back. And he did exactly what that is. He just reduced his cognitive load by being able to create a writing frame for himself. It helped him and it helped students engage their confidence in writing. And it also helps them to strengthen their text evidence use because they have to forces them to go back into the text, whatever content it is, and find evidence to support in their writing. The use of the frame is going to help them with their organization across the subjects, and it's going to build that transferable academic language as they go from subject to subject. It is, even if they use the frame, if they start writing and they realize that a sentence is not where it needs to be, it helps them to basically lift that sentence and move it to another spot within that paragraph. But it's helping them to gain that confidence in their writing to become more fluent writers. The teachers move to support them. You've got to teach them the academic vocabulary. That's why I posted earlier when I was talking about the ELA portion, go back in that glossary. The State Department, has done an amazing job with providing that glossary for us for ELA to tell us exactly what the definitions of those terms are so that you're not having to come up with definitions. So pre-teaching that academic vocabulary, provide those frames that are aligned to those standards, and then use that core response as well as partner practice to help your students do that gradual release model. Like Susan said, it might be a lot of you do. It might be a lot of we do, but eventually the student's going to be able to do that on their own. And use those gradual release scaffolds as that independence grows. And then one of the things Susan was talking about a second ago that I used to do in my class with my students is every morning we would have a quick writing. Sometimes it would be where we just wrote in our journal. Sometimes it would be something that we would respond to something that we read the day before. It might even be a prediction that what we were getting ready to read for that coming day. But sometimes I would just put what you said, Susan. I would just put a question on the board and I'd say, if I was going to ask you this question right now, what's the first way to rephrase that question into the stem to start the writing paragraph? And all I wanted them to do was be able to turn it around. And so just those are quick writing to learn or learning to write routine daily that you can do across the grade levels as you move through the continuum as they go from kindergarten, where we do a lot of sentence starters, all the way up through high school and into college. So those are just great teacher moves to support.
I love, Ginger, something you said, that's music to my ears, is that we have to give students those prompts. I've seen a lot of times, we think just by telling students to write or saying, hey, write in your journal, having something for them to write that's working on a specific skill is so crucial, because we know that a lot of our students struggle. And if we don't give them that prompt, it's very difficult for them just to create something. And then we get things that we don't like inappropriate pictures and other things. At least had that experience with middle schoolers. And so we can cut a lot of that out just by using effective instruction. And so that's important. I'm going to try to. So we'll see if this will show. We have I think a pretty short video of Dr. Anita Archer. She's actually using a writing frame. Since we have time, we will see if it comes up, and y'all will have to tell me if it's playing. If not, then you will have it when we share with you. Um, and Jenny, you'll have to tell me if somebody will have to tell me if it's playing.
So sometimes we write this up, and here I have.
I was worried about that. I was worried that it wouldn't. I shared my sound, but I'm thinking it's just not going to work.
That's a great video too. So at least they'll have it in the slide deck.
It is in your slide deck. And I apologize. I did all the things that they said to do my sound and all of that stuff. Share my sound. I was so proud. I still have things to learn. But that is a great video to actually watch her using a writing frame. It's pretty short to watch. And that's there for you. All right, Ginger.
So this actually just came out not too long ago. We've been, going through our letters journey as teachers. So the State Department sent out this observation look for us for written and oral communication. I just snipped it, but there is the reference at the bottom of the page there. When you get your slides, you'll see it. But these are just the look fors that a teacher would have in a classroom when he or she were going in to work with students, as well as an administrator for that matter. But it's also something that your coaches can use when they're going in to help teachers. Because a lot of times when I was a principal for 20 some odd years, my teachers would always say that the thing that they struggle with the most is teaching writing. They don't know how to teach writing. So trying to give them little snippets of instructional practices during my professional development, my meetings with them and my PLCs, this is an amazing resource that I wish I would have had then, but I wanted to share it with you all. It's hot off the press. It hadn't been out too long, but I wanted to share that with you, as well as some additional references that Susan is, I think I was on the next slide. There you go. There are some other references that we provided for you today that go hand in hand with the work that we've shared today. So I wanted to make sure that you had that.
And I've downloaded all of these references and put them in the folder. The presentation is in the folder. And I think, Jenny, you've put the link to the presentation folder in the chat so that you have that. We will also be emailing that out to all the people that registered for this so that you have this material. We are recording this so that you can kind of go back and take a look if you need to. It will be in the folder when we download it, and also it'll be on our YouTube network. But I think it's really important as you think about implementing, and some of you may be doing all this, and if you are, you know what you need to do? You need to say, I'm grand, I'm wonderful. You need to give yourself an attaboy. Yes, keep it up. If you've gotten something that will help you, or you go, gosh, I want to work on this one thing, then it's great to work within your professional learning communities and start tackling one thing at a time for your students to get better so that we can start improving our writing for our students. It's crucial.
And Susan, before we go to the last, because I know that we've got a couple other slides, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out and a quick plug to the State Department, the Office of Standards. They have some amazing TDW professional learning opportunities that are on their website, and they are specific to the genre of writing. Okay. So if there's something that you're interested in at a grade level, or if there's something that you're getting ready to teach your students and you want some more information, those webinars and those, whether they're face-to-face or in person, they've done a phenomenal job, and they truly do drill down to the type of writing. So I just wanted to give a plug for that.
Absolutely. And it's so nice to have those things available. We did a more generalized thing and really tried to talk about how we can intensify what we're doing for students. And so definitely take advantage of all of those. This is our Evidence-Based Practices Network. We've got a lot of tools that you can get online. In fact, we have a whole document on scaffolding. We had a teacher last spring that did an amazing job talking about how she uses scaffolding in the classroom. That's just one example. So you can go online and look at those resources. You can connect with us by joining our newsletter. We are I'm really excited because we're very close to having 500 subscribers. So come on, if you're not subscribing today, subscribe. It will make me so happy. It will make me joyful. And also, the oldest person of our group is the social media coordinator, and I want more friends. I need more friends. I desperately want more friends. And this is where we post a lot of our upcoming events, or also if we just see something that's really great for teachers to use or for instructional coaches to use, we share those things through social media along with our teammates. So definitely you can follow us on these platforms. I can't add another one. Um, okay, I don't know why there were two of those, but okay, why that's going that way. I have no idea, and I'm not going to try to figure it out. All right.
If you dabble in writing frames in the next couple weeks or this year, just reach out to one of us. I would love to see what you're doing. I would love to help you. I would love to jump in and join and chat with you and just this is amazing work, and I know the power of it, and I would love to help you along your journey.
Absolutely. Also, we should have an evaluation form that's in the chat box. It is through that you can receive your certificate of attendance. So if you complete that, then you can expect an email back saying that you have attended